welcome to a video about something that's a little bit newer than what I typically cover on this channel. And in today's video, I'm going to be building a new modern computer because my old one's like 12 years old now, so yeah, it's time for an upgrade, and I figured may as well make a video about it. Let me tell you about some of the parts I chose. So starting off with the AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. I chose this CPU mainly because it has some of the best price to performance ratio. I searched around quite a bit and I did quite a bit of research on different CPUs and whatnot, but I think this one's probably the best since I'm on a tight budget and I want a fairly high performance PC for video editing and whatnot. So next up is the motherboard, and I decided to go with this MSI A520M. It's a mini ATX motherboard, and I chose this because it supports the Ryzen 5 3rd generation processors, and it was in my price range, and it got good reviews, so I decided to go with it. Nothing too fancy, but it'll work. As for the power supply, I decided to go for the Seasonic Focus GX650. It's a 650 watt power supply, 80 plus gold, and yeah, I just picked it because it was a good price and it got good reviews, so yeah. Well, it's also fully modular, which is nice. So as for RAM, I decided to go with 16 gigabytes of this Corsair Vengeance LPX RAM. Nothing too exciting, it's just RAM, DDR4. I decided to go with 16 gigabytes. Even though I'm doing video editing, it's really only in 1080p 30, so I don't need that much RAM. As for the graphics card, I'm going to be reusing my old graphics card because it's too expensive. My tired old GTX 760 here. It's not exactly the latest and greatest, but it'll have to do because graphics cards are really expensive with the chip shortage. Oh, and for the case, I decided to go with this Cooler Master MasterBox Pro 5. I picked this case mainly because it's very roomy. It can accommodate up to eATX boards, even though I'm only using a micro ATX. But it'll give me lots of room to work inside of it, so yeah. So now it's time to get everything unboxed. This is pretty exciting for me since this is the first time I've built a brand new computer from all new components. I've built computers before, but it's been from older components, just slapping them together, reusing old components. I am reusing my old graphics card though, but everything else is brand new. So now it's time to plug the cords I need into the power supply, and I'm really liking this modular power supply here. It's definitely nice not to have that big chunk of wires just hanging out. And then I'm just gonna screw it into the case. Now it's time to turn our attention to the motherboard. And here's the Ryzen 5 CPU itself. As you can see, it has the pins on the bottom, so the pins stick out the bottom of the CPU. So this uses like the older style socket, because AMD CPUs have the pins sticking out the bottom. And then you just kind of gotta turn it a bit until it fits, and then you push this little lever down, and it's now in there. So yeah. Now it's time for the RAM, and we'll just clip it into the sockets like that. And I absolutely love the sound of RAM clicking into its sockets. That click is just so satisfying. I don't know, anybody else think that? Now onto the heatsink. So I'm just going to be using the one that came with the CPU. I'll probably upgrade this later down for something a bit beefier. But for now, I'm just going to use the one that comes with, and it comes with some thermal paste too. So that just screws down like that. So now it's time to lower the motherboard down into the case and then screw it down. And now it's time for the absolutely horrible, tedious process of plugging the cable headers for like the front panel power button, LEDs, and USB ports into the headers on the motherboard. I hate doing this. But anyway, that's one of the reasons why I wanted this large case, since it has quite a bit of room to work in. So I'm quite happy with this case. Very easy to work inside of. And I also installed this 250 gigabyte Samsung SATA SSD, but I seem to have lost the footage of me installing it, or I just forgot to press record. I don't know, but trust me, I installed it. Okay, so now I've got it plugged in, all hooked up, and I fired it up, and here I am at the BIOS screen. And it has to be the coolest BIOS menus I've ever seen. It's all mouse driven and everything, so very nice. There's only one thing, that SSD I installed, it just wasn't detecting it. It just wasn't showing up in the BIOS menu. I tried it at my old computer, it didn't work, so I don't know. I pulled it out of an old laptop. I had upgraded that old laptop with this SSD, and I haven't used it for a few years, so I just pulled the SSD out and put it in here. But I think I'm going to need to get a new SSD So I decided to get a 500 gigabyte M2 NVMe SSD. This is the Samsung one here, and I'm going to install it. These mount directly to the board. I'm really excited. I've never used one of these before, and I've always wanted to try it out. Heard they're quite fast, and it just goes into the board like that. And then there's this itty bitty little screw that is just like absolutely insanely tiny. I spent probably about 10 minutes trying to screw this thing down, trying to get the little screw in there, but eventually got it all screwed down, and that one works just fine. So now let's install Windows 10. I will install Windows 11 later probably, but I just have a Windows 10 bootable USB stick kicking around, and I'm too lazy to make a Windows 11 one up, so I'll just install Windows 10 for now, and I'll probably upgrade it to 11 later on. It's one of the reasons why I'm upgrading my computer, is want something that can run Windows 11, so yeah. Now it's time to get Filmora installed and get to work editing this video. And as for videos export quite a bit faster on this machine than my old one. Still takes a little bit, but it's faster than my old computer, because I actually did another video project on this computer before I did this video, because the other one was part of a school assignment. But this is the first YouTube video I'm editing on here, and yeah. But anyway, life's not all about work, so what are the gaming capabilities like? Well, obviously the first game I had to try was SimCity 2000, like one of my favorite games of all time. It runs absolutely amazingly on here. This game has pretty high system requirements, so yeah, I'm surprised it ran as well as it did. Okay, a more modern game that I play a fair bit that can get surprisingly demanding is Minecraft here, and I decided to test it out by loading up an amplified world, and that's basically just when the terrain generation just goes absolutely crazy and it's really hard on your performance, but decided to do that to test it out, and this machine was able to keep a steady 60 FPS, so I thought that would be more GPU dependent, and I wouldn't really see much of a difference since I'm using the same GPU, but actually the CPU does make a difference when it comes to that. And I am using Optifine too, which is a mod that helps improve performance and allow some other stuff. But Minecraft, the graphics aren't super demanding on their own, so through the power of mods, let's up the ante a bit. So decided to try out the Zeus PTGI shaders. It's basically like an experimental shader pack that you can install through the Optifine mod that basically gives you ray tracing even if you don't have an RTX graphics card. And I love it, it looks really cool, and I don't have an RTX graphics card, and allows you to have ray tracing. And obviously performance is pretty poor, especially on a 760, but anyway, it looks really awesome. I love just looking around sometimes with this, because even with being at 15 frames per second, and this is very GPU dependent, so there was no performance increase when it came to running the Zeus PTGI shaders, because that's very graphics card dependent, and not very much CPU dependent, which is what I expected. Okay, so what are my final thoughts on this computer? Well, I actually like it a lot. I think I did pretty good, since my goal was to keep it under $1,000, and it worked out to be just around exactly $1,000, and yeah, so it was definitely the top end of what I was willing to pay for a new computer, but I'm really happy with it, and I think I did the best I could with the budget I had. I'm really happy with the CPU I picked, despite not being the most powerful thing. It's not the most absolute powerful whiz-bang computer I could have built, but it's really good, and it's good enough for what I do. I really like the case. I'm happy with the CPU I picked. The graphics card I'll probably update when the chip shortage is over and prices come down a bit more. The M2 NVMe SSD, that thing is awesome. Ridiculously fast. This thing boots up really quickly. Everything loads really fast. Definitely really like that. As for the motherboard, it's not the best. I would have, if I were to do it all over again, I would have maybe gone for a full-size board so I can accommodate maybe some bigger heat sinks, because the RAM is really close to the CPU, and there's no RGB headers for the RGB fans in this case, which is not a huge deal, first world problems, but it would be nice to have. So, not a huge deal. This motherboard's fine, it does its job, it's good, doesn't affect performance in any way, but if I were to do it again, I maybe would have gone with a slightly different, maybe slightly better motherboard, but anyway, overall, I'm really happy with it. So that's just about it for today's video. It's a lot newer than the stuff I typically cover on my channel, but I'll be back to my typical slightly more outdated stuff in my next video, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, if you're interested in older computers unlike this one, maybe consider subscribing. We're almost at 500 subscribers, which is really cool, so yeah, that's exciting. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.